What if I told you there's a simple command that can activate money within 24 hours and that most people ignore it every single day without even realizing it? It sounds like an exaggeration, I know, especially if you've already tried everything. Affirmations, the law of attraction, visualizations, manifestation techniques, and still, money keeps taking too long, stuck, distant, as if there were an invisible barrier between you and what you want to attract. But let me ask you something. How many times have you asked for money? How many times have you said, I need money, I want money, I hope this works, universe, help me? Now pay attention to this, because this is where everything starts to change. Maybe the problem was never your intention, never your faith, never how much you tried. Maybe the problem is the way you're communicating, because there's a huge difference between asking and commanding. And money, unlike what you've been taught, doesn't respond to those who ask. It responds to those who take control. But no one says this clearly. No one shows you that there's a specific language, an exact frequency, a way of speaking that completely changes the game. And when you don't understand this, you fall into a dangerous cycle. You ask, you wait, you don't see results, you start to doubt. And the more you doubt, the further everything gets, not because the universe is ignoring you, but because it's responding exactly to what you're emitting. And this is where something comes in that can completely change your reality. There is a command, a specific, direct command, no fluff, that doesn't come from need, but from authority, a command that doesn't ask for permission. It activates. And when you use this command the right way, something shifts instantly inside you. It's like you move from the position of someone who waits to someone who decides, and it's exactly this shift that makes money start to move. Now, before I show you what this command is and how it truly works, you need to understand something that almost no one realizes, because maybe, without knowing it, you've been repeating a pattern every single day that is completely blocking the manifestation of money in your life. And when you see this, you will never speak the same way again. And that's why, before we continue, I need to ask you something simple, but very important. If at any point in this beginning you felt like this made sense, like it touched something you've already experienced, then go ahead and like this video right now. It may seem small, but this is what helps this kind of message reach more people who are also stuck in this same pattern without even realizing it. And I want to hear from you too. Comment down below, I was asking, or even I've felt this before. Because when you put it into words, you start to see more clearly what's been happening all along. And there's one more thing. If you really want to learn how to use this language the right way, not just understand it, but apply it in a way that creates real results, then subscribe to the channel now, because the next videos will go deeper into exactly what almost no one explains. And most people miss this shift simply because they don't continue. Now, take a deep breath for a second, because what you're about to realize from here on out can completely change the way you communicate with money. Now let me show you what's really happening behind all of this. Because most people are trying to manifest money every single day, but without realizing it, they're reinforcing its absence, and this happens in such an automatic, subtle way that it goes completely unnoticed. Think about this scenario. You wake up, grab your phone, open your banking app, and before anything else, you already feel that slight tension in your chest, that expectation mixed with worrying. You look at your balance, and depending on what you see, something inside you shifts. If it's low, a sense of urgency appears. If it hasn't changed, frustration shows up. And even if you try to stay positive, deep down there's a silent thought saying, I need this to change. Now pay attention to this. That moment, that exact moment, is where most people start emitting the wrong frequency, because it's not about what you say after. It's about what you feel before. And when you enter that state of need, of lack, of waiting, everything that comes after carries that same energy. You might even say, money comes to me, I am abundant, wealth is on the way. But behind those words there's a vibration of doubt, anxiety, of wanting it to work. And money doesn't respond to words. It responds to frequency. That changes everything. Because suddenly, it doesn't matter how many times you repeat a phrase. If the energy behind it is lack, the result will be more lack. It's like trying to call someone, but dialing the wrong number. The connection never happens, not because there's no answer, but because the signal isn't aligned. Now think about how many times you've said, I want money. It sounds like a positive phrase, but it carries a hidden structure. When you say I want, What you're actually affirming is I don't have, and your brain, your subconscious mind, your entire energetic field, interprets that as your current state. You are reinforcing the absence, and the more you reinforce absence, the more reality you create from it. That's why so many people fall into a repetitive cycle. They affirm, they wait, they don't see results, they start to doubt, and then they reinforce scarcity even more. And the most dangerous part is that they think they're doing it right. They think the problem is lack of time, or that it just hasn't worked yet. But in reality, they're using a language that keeps everything exactly as it is. Now let me show you something that few people have the courage to admit. There's a brutal difference between someone who lives waiting for money to arrive and someone who literally makes money move, and that difference isn't in effort. It's not in knowledge. It's not even in the number of techniques a person knows. It's in identity. It's in how that person positions themselves internally, because the one who asks is always below. The one who waits always depends, but the one who commands occupies a completely different place. And here comes something that might feel uncomfortable at first, but it's necessary. You need to start observing the way you talk about money in your daily life, not just when you're trying to manifest, but in conversations, in thoughts, in automatic reactions. Because every time you say it's hard, I don't know how I'm going to make it, I need something to happen, you're reinforcing an identity of scarcity, and identity creates reality. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine someone who doesn't ask, who doesn't beg, who doesn't wait, someone who speaks as if it's already certain. As if money isn't something distant, but something that responds to them. Do you see the difference? It's not about arrogance. It's not about illusion. It's about positioning. And that positioning completely changes the way your mind works, how your decisions happen, and most importantly, how opportunities begin to appear. Because when you change your frequency, you change what you perceive, and when you change what you perceive, you change what you access. But here's the most important point of all. You don't change this frequency just by thinking positive. You change it through language. The way you speak activates internal states, and those states create your reality. That's why there is a specific command, not just any phrase, not just any affirmation. It's a command that carries a different structure, a different energy, a different intention, a command that doesn't come from lack, but from authority. And when you begin to understand this, you realize it was never about repeating pretty words. It was always about stepping into a position you've never occupied before. And it's exactly this position that starts activating money in a way that almost feels too fast. Now, before moving forward, try something simple. If something here made sense to you, if you started noticing patterns you had never seen before, comment a short but powerful phrase. I stop asking. That's it. Because when you declare that, you already begin to step out of that automatic cycle and enter a new state, a state where you're ready to understand what comes next. And what comes next is exactly the shift that separates those who keep waiting from those who start seeing money move for real. Now that you've started to notice this pattern, let me take you a little deeper, because this is where the real shift happens. The change that isn't just about technique, but about identity. Because there's a moment, almost imperceptible, when a person stops being someone who tries to manifest money and becomes someone who naturally attracts and activates it. And that moment doesn't happen when they learn one more technique. It happens when they change how they position themselves. Let me tell you something you may have never stopped to observe. For a long time, I saw people saying they were manifesting money. Some talked about specific amounts, others talked about opportunities that simply appeared. And at first, it seemed like luck, like coincidence, even like exaggeration. But when you start looking closer, there's a pattern. These people don't speak like they need. They don't think like they're waiting. They don't act like they depend. There's something in the way they express themselves, a quiet certainty, an unforced authority that completely changes the frequency they emit, and that changes everything. Because while most people are trying to convince the universe, these people are already speaking as if it's inevitable. And this isn't about pretending. It's not about lying to yourself. It's about assuming an internal position. I remember a very specific case. A person who was completely stuck financially, overdrawn account, pressure building, that constant feeling of I need to fix this now. Maybe you've felt that before, and like most people, they tried everything: affirmations, techniques, videos, methods. Always searching for something that would finally work, but always with that emotional background of urgency, of need. Of I need this to work, and then, one day, something changed. It wasn't a new technique. It wasn't a miracle method. It was a change in language. They stopped saying I need money and started observing what was really behind that phrase, and they realized that every time they spoke like that, they were reinforcing exactly the state they wanted to leave. So they did something different. Instead of trying to attract, they began to position themselves as someone who was no longer in that scarcity. At first, it felt strange. It felt artificial. It even felt uncomfortable, because the mind tries to pull you back, tries to say this isn't true, tries to keep you in the old pattern. But even so, they continued. And something started to happen. First, internally, a different feeling, less anxiety, less urgency, more control. Then, externally, small things started to appear. An unexpected contact. An opportunity that hadn't shown up before. Money that wasn't expected. Nothing huge right away, but enough to realize something had shifted. And then it accelerated, because when you change your frequency, you change what you see, what you allow, what you accept. And that creates a chain reaction. Now pay very close attention to this. Most people think they need to see results in order to believe, but in reality, it's when you change first that results begin to appear. And that's exactly why so many people get stuck, because they keep waiting for an external sign before changing internally. But those who understand this game do the opposite. First, they change how they speak. First, they change how they position themselves. First, they assume a different identity, and then the world starts to respond. And this is where the most important point of all comes in. This change doesn't happen in thought. It happens in language, because the way you speak shapes what you feel, and what you feel defines your frequency, and your frequency defines what you manifest. That's why not just any phrase works, not just any affirmation activates money. There is a specific structure, a way of saying it, an energy behind the words that completely changes the response you receive. And that is exactly what separates those who try from those who activate, those who repeat, from those who command, those who wait, from those who see it happen. Now, before moving forward, I want you to notice something within yourself. Just by hearing this, something has already started to change. Maybe subtle, maybe slight, but different. And that happens because you're beginning to step out of the old pattern and into a new level of awareness. If this made sense to you, comment something simple but powerful. I take control, because that phrase is already a first step, a clear signal that you're no longer in the same place as before. And what comes next is exactly what turns this positioning into something practical, direct, and impossible to ignore. And now that you understand this shift in position, that it's not about asking, but about assuming, it's time to move into the part that truly turns all of this into direct action. Because up to this point, you've recognized the pattern, understood the difference between a frequency of scarcity and a frequency of authority. But something essential is still missing: the command. Not just any phrase, not just any affirmation. A real command, one that carries intention, direction, and identity at the same time. And pay close attention, because what I'm about to show you now won't work if you listen passively. You need to feel it, you need to step into it, because this command doesn't act only on what you say. It acts on who you become in the moment you say it. The command is simple, but its impact lies in how you say it. Repeat with me mentally right now. Money responds to my voice. That's it, 4 words. Direct, effortless, no fluff. But notice what happens when you say this with presence. You're no longer saying I want money. You're not saying I need this to work. You are affirming a reality. You are claiming a position. You are completely shifting the direction of your energy. Now do this. Say it again, but this time more consciously. Slower, stronger. Double quotes. Money responds to my voice. Feel the difference. It's not about volume. It's about authority. Because when you say it with doubt, it becomes just another phrase. But when you say it with certainty, it becomes a command. And what most people don't understand is that the universe, or rather, reality, doesn't respond to what you desire. It responds to what you sustain. And this command works exactly because of that. It takes you out of the position of someone who waits and places you in the position of someone who defines. Now think about this. If money responds to your voice, then you don't need to chase it, you don't need to beg, you don't need to live in that anxiety of will this work. You begin to operate on another level, a level where your words are not attempts, they are directions, and that completely changes your behavior, because from the moment you assume that money responds to your voice, you start acting differently without even noticing. You communicate differently, you make decisions with more clarity, you stop accepting situations you used to accept. And most importantly, you begin to notice opportunities that once went unseen. It's like your mind opens a new filter, and that filter starts aligning everything with what you declared. Now let me show you something even more important. This command doesn't activate money because it's magical, it activates because it reorganizes you internally. And when you change internally, the external has no choice but to follow. But there's one detail that makes all the difference. Most people hear a command like this, repeat it a few times, and then go back to their old pattern. They go back to doubting, they go back to focusing on lack. They go back to the frequency of waiting, and then nothing changes, not because the command doesn't work, but because the person doesn't sustain the state. That's why, when you use this command, you can't use it as a test, you can't say it and then see if it happens, because that already puts you back in the position of someone who waits, and the one who waits hasn't fully assumed it yet. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine saying this, and simply knowing that it is so. No rush, no anxiety, no need for proof, just certainty. That is the frequency that activates, that is the language that moves, and that's exactly why, when someone truly steps into this state, results begin to appear in unexpected ways, messages that come in, opportunities that arise, money that shows up from places you didn't expect, not as magic, but as a consequence of alignment. Now, before we continue, I want you to do something simple, but something that can mark this moment. If this phrase made sense to you, if you felt something different when repeating it, comment exactly this. Money responds to my voice, but comment it as a decision, not as a test, not out of curiosity. As a position, because from the moment you declare it, you begin to train your mind, your language, your frequency to operate on this new level, and most importantly, you begin to definitively step out of that old pattern, where everything depended on something external happening, because what comes next will show you exactly how to sustain this without falling back into the cycle of doubt and waiting. Now pay close attention to this, because this is where almost everyone sabotages their own results without realizing it. You might say the command, repeat the phrase, feel that energy for a few minutes, but if right after that you go back to the old pattern, doubt, anxiety, urgency, distrust, you simply cancel the frequency you just activated. And that's exactly why so many people say it doesn't work, when in reality it did. It was just interrupted. Think about it. It's not about saying a magic phrase and waiting for a miracle to fall from the sky. It's about sustaining a state. It's about becoming the person who speaks and doesn't go back on it. Because when you say money obeys me, money responds to my voice, it can't be just a moment. It has to become an identity. And identity doesn't fluctuate with every notification, every bank balance, every negative thought that shows up. And I know exactly what happens after you turn off this video. The mind starts, is this real? What if I'm fooling myself? What if nothing happens? That's the most critical point. It's not when you say the phrase, it's when doubt tries to pull you back. Because right there, in that exact moment, you have two options. Either you go back to being the person who asks, who waits, who chases, or you remain as the person who has already declared and knows that reality is reorganizing. And here's something no one explains to you. Manifestation doesn't fail. Consistency fails. The command doesn't lose power. The person issuing the command loses firmness. Money doesn't ignore you. It responds exactly to the stability of your frequency. If today you speak with certainty, tomorrow with doubt, then with fear, the signal becomes confused. And when the signal is confused, the response is too. Now imagine the opposite. Imagine sustaining this for hours, then for a full day, then for consecutive days, without needing to prove anything to anyone, without constantly checking, without begging for signs, just maintaining the internal posture of someone who has already decided. That's where the shift happens. It's not in the moment of speaking, it's in what you sustain after it, And let me tell you something that completely changes the game. The universe doesn't test you, it reflects you. If you change every moment, it changes with you. If you remain steady, it responds with that same steadiness. So it's not about convincing the universe. It's about stopping yourself from contradicting yourself. So from now on, when you use the command, don't treat it like an experiment. Don't treat it like let's see if it works. Treat it as a decision, as something that has already been defined. Because when you truly decide, you don't mentally go back on it. You don't negotiate with doubt. You don't make space for scarcity to take control again. And maybe, in this exact moment, you're starting to realize that the real power was never in the phrase itself, but in who you become after saying it. And if this made sense to you, comment below a simple phrase, but one filled with intention. I sustain the command, because that's not just a comment, it's a position. If you made it this far, it wasn't by chance. On some level, something inside you recognized this message. Maybe you felt a chill, maybe a quiet certainty, or maybe just a different kind of curiosity. But one thing is certain, those who stay until the end are no longer in the same place they were when they started. So do this. Don't let this end here. If this message spoke to you, comment now. Activate the command. Don't overthink it. Don't analyze too much. Just write it. Because this kind of declaration isn't just interaction, it's positioning. It's you marking a before and after. And if at any point in this video you felt that something made sense, that something clicked, then subscribe to the channel now. Because this isn't a standalone video. This is a sequence. It's a process. And the next step might be exactly what will solidify everything you started to understand today. Leave a like as well, not just to support the video, but as a clear signal that you want more of this kind of content showing up for you. The more you engage, the more this kind of message returns to your reality. And now pay attention. The next video is already on your screen. And it's not there by accident. It was designed exactly for those who made it this far. For those who have already activated the command and want to understand the next level of all this, click it and keep going.